So, what's your plan in today's market with AI, with things changing and the commissions not being paid by the buyer brokers? Where do you see you in 3 to 5 years? Like, how do you picture the real estate business? Just to let you know, because you should know. Thanks for joining in. We have Steve Games today. I know most of you know him. If you don't know him, you will know him by the end of this interview. Instrumental realtor, successful broker. In fact, world-renowned, being the biggest realtor in America, especially on the Pacific Coast, where he combined several franchises to create a very successful career for himself. We're going to be speaking to him, and here we go. Enjoy.
So
several franchises.
Several.
That's an interest. Perhaps.
Well, I was going on the. I'm starting at the Rock, the Prudential Rock.
Well, I think it's interesting to go way before that, and I had come out of the Navy. I'd spent 8 years in the United States Navy, all of which I'm very proud of, by the way. And we don't want to get off on that subject, but
well, why not? I actually wanted to talk to you the way I was gonna.
Well, Frank, he was on the Kitty Hawk, and the Kitty Hawk was one of our longest-lasting diesel. Was it diesel or gas?
Yeah, it was diesel.
Diesel.
Yeah.
And it used steam to catapult. What was it like?
Oh, catapulting the aircraft?
Yeah, a big steam.
Well, first of all, let's start by.
Well, let's hear what he did in the Navy.
Yeah. Whatever you guys want to do.
I want to hear that. I think this is good stuff.
I think what I'd like to say about the Navy is that I went in the Navy as a complete loser.
How old were you?
I was just 18.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I had graduated last from my class in Glendale High School in the late summer.
Stay a little extra.
and I literally had nothing. And I had a beautiful family, and they loved me dearly, and they were nice, wonderful, successful people. But I was the troubled child.
Yeah.
Back, today you can have SD, AD, RD, LD, or whatever, all kinds of different descriptions of when I was in school, they called it STUPID. Right?
I know that acronym.
Exactly. Yeah. I thought that was the only one who had that.
Yeah, no. And I remember my father. He was very involved in the Mercury program. He was a rocket scientist, and he said, "Well, maybe we should take the kid downtown in Los Angeles." And they took me to take the aptitude test for trade school, and I failed it, which really was.
How do you fail an aptitude test?
Yeah, they did love me, and I failed it. I failed another test later on in my life too, but I failed them all. And the only place where I felt that I got a fair shake was in the United States Navy, and it was something that. I remember being here in what's now called Liberty Station,
right?
And I was going through boot camp in Liberty Station, and they had a program where there were only 2 awards that you could win, and you could win it out of 600 men. So it was a group composed of 10 companies of 60 men, and you could win this. You could win either the outstanding recruiter, you could win the honor man. And clearly, I felt that I could compile more points. I was in good shape. I was smart enough. I could maybe win that. And so they test you on everything, and you go through 13 weeks. And at the end of it, I was the outstanding recruit.
Wow.
That's good. Out of 600.
Of 600 men.
Yeah, that's huge.
And as I was getting ready to leave and go to Memphis, Tennessee, of all places, but that's where my next school was, the lieutenant came up to me and he said, "That's quite an honor, And he said, "Would you like to know how many votes you got for honor man?" And I was figuring probably out of 600 because the men voted for honor man. Out of 600, I probably got 250 votes, and the other guy probably got 300 or close to that. And he looked at me, and I said, yeah, oh, absolutely, I'd love to know. And he said, 1.
For the honor.
1?
You got 1 vote. And I said,
was it you?
Does that include me? And he said, it was you. and at that particular point in my life, it's the most important day of my life, absolutely, with no exception, because what I realized was amassing points and being number one and defeating everybody else is about the least important thing you can actually do in life. And it sent me off with goosebumps and fear and everything else that you could possibly imagine to become what I would consider myself to be. I would consider myself to be a realtor, and I see that as a badge of courage. For me, it's the most extraordinary thing that I could have found as a career. But I also see myself as a leader. And it was from that 1 vote that I realized that leadership was something that I had to learn. And the United States Navy, at threat of my own life, taught me leadership. I was the flight deck troubleshooter on an aircraft carrier deck, which is statistically the most dangerous place in the world.
Right.
And
with the cables.
Yeah, those cables.
Everything.
Chopping people in half.
The cables are kind of insignificant in comparison to being burnt, sucked up, run over, blown off. The list. The list is engaging, to say the least. So I learned that the people around me, the men around me that trusted me, lived and died based on my ability to lead.
Right.
And unlike people who are my true heroes in life, which are the soldiers who get shot at, that's a different fear.
Right.
My possibilities of being maimed or killed or whatever came from mechanical mistakes,
right, or
from mistakes that you could make actually yourself,
your own errors,
not from the threat of
round hitting you in the head.
I mean, those are the true heroes, and I will always salute them no matter what. But leadership is such an interesting thing, and I actually stopped you when you were talking about franchise real estate because I got out of the Navy and went to a class at Mesa College, and it's the first college class. I was like intimidated by going to Mesa College at night, right? And so I went to this class, and it was called Real Estate Principles, which I found out you had to take to get your real estate license, and I think it was the professor. Now, this is a night school teacher, right? And we called him professor. And so somewhere in my life, I also learned that whatever level you're at in education, the person who's teaching you is the most valuable person on earth to you at that particular time. The professor says, I'm going to revolutionize real estate business forever. He says, I said to my buddy, he's a night school teacher at Mesa College.
Who's this guy? Right.
What's he talking about? And so we went through the class, and at the end of the class, when we were graduating, he said, by the way, boys, I told you that I was going to revolutionize the real estate business. And we said, okay, how are you going to do that? Now, remember where the conversation started. He said, I'm going to franchise the real estate business with my partners, and we're going to call our company Century 21.
Jeez.
Okay.
He did it.
Right, obviously.
He did it. Don't ever doubt anybody.
Right.
Anybody with a dream.
Never underestimate anyone. Right.
Frank, he changed my entire life. Everything that I've ever done in real estate, short of the most important thing, which I guess we should get to, is that franchise became my way. I'm probably the most successful guy in franchise.
The Colonel Sanders of real estate.
Of taking advantage of it. So it was was a guy named Bob Leeds, who started the whole thing as one of the 4 partners with Century 21, which they founded here in San Diego, by the way, which is pretty incredible.
That
Steve,
is incredible. A lot of things started in San Diego.
Let me go back just a bit about leadership, because you're definitely a leader. People follow you. And there's 2 rules of thought on leadership. Some are born with it, and some some develop it. And you said because you got that 1 vote. But knowing you and knowing people who know you and knowing people who talk about you,
Is born with
I
it.
think you had to have something.
Some competitive edge.
Even though you may not have done well in school, and I don't fault you for that. I fault a lot of times the school itself and the teachers. Maybe they give up, or they just didn't, because you're not a dumb guy.
You don't fit in the box.
You don't fit in the box. But what is your thoughts on, are leaders born or are they developed, or is it combo?
I think that anybody can become a leader, and I think it's a combination of street smart and education that can allow you to do that, and where you get exposed to, and whether or not in your heart you have the desire to give. And I think giving is really an interesting part of leadership. Now, there's a lot of leaders, but they don't lead people. So leading people for me is completely different than just being a leader in a business or in an industry. There's lots of leaders in our industry that don't even like the people they lead. So my trick was compassion. It was empathy, all of those kinds of things, because I knew what it was like to not be accepted or appreciated,
Right.
and I believe that from the heart. But I was born funny, right? and so, if you think leadership has to do with being funny, I'll give you an example of how my life changed, and it's about leadership. It's about childhood. It's about risk, and risk is something that a leader has to be able to take, and it's a risk to be the leader. Therefore, so I'm in high school, and I did well with the social world, particularly. I think I was good with relationships and that sort of stuff behind the scenes, and so I wanted to date, and I was in high school, and my parents wouldn't give me any money, and I wasn't doing unless I did well in school. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right?
I gotcha.
So I decided to go to work in the Hollywood Bowl, and it's a famous place, and it's certainly incredible. And I went to the Hollywood Bowl because I heard there was a job available as a prom captain. And what prom captains do is they take people's tickets, and they look at the tickets, and then they take them to the seat, and they wear a tuxedo. And in those days, you wore a tuxedo, which was a rented tuxedo that they gave you. And I think they paid you $8 a night. Please don't hold me to the accuracy, because that was a long time ago. It was 1963, actually. And the guy said I could have the job as the prom captain. And I said, thank you. And as I was walking out, a guy that looked like the fox in Pinocchio, the guy that talks the Pinocchio into going onto the island and gets him in all the trouble, right?
Yeah.
That guy came out, and he said, hey, kid, you want a real job? And I said, what do you mean a real job? He said, I got a real job. I got a real job for you. Talk fast. I mean, slick guy. And he says, that $8 isn't going to do you any good. He says, I can get you a job where you can make more money. And I said, what's the job? And he said, I want you to rent my cushions. I said, rent your cushions? He said, yeah. He says, we rent cushions here in the Hollywood Bowl because all the benches are wood.
Right.
He said, so you rent a cushion for 15 cents. You keep a nickel, I keep a dime. I did my little calculating, and my father's a mathematician, and I figured I'd better involve him. So I went home and asked which job I should take. And it changed my relationship with my father, who was a a high-rated rocket scientist, engineer of some esteem, and a big man, big, powerful guy who was of the old world where you didn't hug and all of that kind of stuff. And he said, let me think about it. And I explained both jobs to him. And when we got up in the morning, he said to me, he said, you should take the cushion job.
Yeah.
And I said, why? And he said, because it's you.
Yeah, well, it worked.
And I said,
you turned cushions into homes.
What are you talking about? And he said, well, he went to the opening of the LA Coliseum in 1932. And since then, he'd been going to the Coliseum, and he always watched the peanut guys, the peanut salesmen.
Yeah, I was too. And I love those guys.
And I said to him, what's that got to do with me in the Hollywood Bowl? He said, you need to be like the successful peanut salesman. And I said, how many are there? And he said he thinks there's 50 peanut salesmen in the Coliseum, right? And I said, well, what should I be like? He said, well, there's only 2 of them that make any money.
Right.
And I said, what's the difference between the 48 that don't and the 2 that do? He says, the 2 that do don't sell peanuts. I said, what do they sell? He said, themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
He said themselves, and that's what you're capable of doing.
Right. That's a good one.
Good, smart
right?
dad.
So I went to the Hollywood Bowl, and I took the concession job.
Do you have to give the tux back?
Yeah, no, they didn't get to wear a tux, and I was a little frazzled about that. But my father said they have a spiel, and I said, "What's a spiel?" And he explained it to me, and so I came up with a spiel. You want to hear the spiel?
Yeah,
absolutely,
of course.
It says. You get a cushion noodle, it's only 15 cents a long night show, and a real hard bench. Apparently, it's guaranteed your stomach scans people under the rhythm bottle.
Sold.
People say,
what the heck?
Say what? Say it again. Yeah, get a cushion noodle, 15 cents a long night show, and a real hard bench. Apparently, it's guaranteed your stomach scans people under the rhythm bottle. Hey, kid, what'd you say? I said, hey, rent my cushions. I'll tell you what I said. Right? They said, oh, come on. Tell us what you said. I said, I'll slow it down. You can hear it. Rent my cushions. They said, okay, we'll take the cushions. I said, if you like the cushions, can I keep the change? Right? The cushions are cushions. He said, well, if you like the spiel, can I keep the change? Right? And they said, yeah, give it to us again. If you can have the change. So now I got a 50-cent piece in my hand.
Right.
Or I got $1 in my hand. And if they like what I said, I get to keep the change.
Wow, okay, I got you.
So now what I've got is I've got a spiel that says, you get a cushion here, it's only 15 cents. It's a long, long show on a real hard bench. It's a pain reliever that's guaranteed not to upset your stomach, and the Anderson people never thought to put it in the bottle, and people would crack up laughing, right? They'd rent more cushions. I became the pre-show for the Hollywood Bowl.
Wow.
Right? And I made enough money to drive a Corvette to and from my senior year in high school. Yeah!
That's good.
Did you ever think about getting in showbiz? Like for the entertainment values? Anyone ever spot you and go, you need to be in show business, kid?
Come on. The answer to that is I was listening to a podcast or something this morning called what was it, Blockbuster or Netflix. I think you've probably heard it. It's current on Inman and it's pretty abrasive and it talks about so did I ever think about getting into being an actor or an actress? I am.
You are.
Right.
Right. And it's the most important single thing to helping people find their dream. See, it's not phony.
Right.
It's styling. It's presentation. It's making people feel good.
Right.
It's everything that acting does when it goes on the video screen. And I act every day. And I'm so proud of it, I can't stand it. And what that whole show was about this morning is not who will replace who in the real estate business. It was what kind of company will replace the other kind of company in the real estate business, not about replacing the real estate agent. because the real estate agent can't be replaced.
Got it.
And for how many years, Frank, have we heard
we're going to be replaced?
We're going to be replaced.
I agree with you.
You know, people are being replaced. You were talking about it earlier. People are being replaced in every sense. But when it comes to the heart, and when it comes to your home, and when it comes to the American dream,
you can't do it.
You can't replace the real estate agent.
No.
You can replace the bad real estate agent,
right.
And you can replace the real estate agent that doesn't know what chat is, right, and doesn't understand what technology is. But you can't replace me if I'm staying up to date in technology and I'm ready to go out and do the very best that I can in terms of leading the real estate process.
It's really important to you, I can tell, just by the last 10 seconds, that the American dream is what I'm going to assume is driving you. Why is it so important to you for people to own their own house?
It's such a big question.
I know.
It's such a big question.
We have time.
And it's
huge. But it seems like when I see you choke up a little bit, you get emotional. I'm the same way as you. People with humor tend to be like that. We're focused on, and what I'm focused on, what my brother focused on, because as you know, we're two real estate brokers here in California. I never, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but I never think about the commission. I think about truly giving someone the feeling that I had and my parents have had when they were immigrants, actually fleeing another country to get into America and achieving that home. It's important to me to do that to others. What drives you?
Well, it should be something that's scripted, quite frankly. It's so important. But I can tell you, it starts with the idea that it's security. And it turns out that it's not just security for your day-to-day life, because it is that. It is the ability to feel like this is mine, and this is where I can raise my family, and this is where I can love my family, and this is where my heart is. But in addition to that, it's also proven to be year after year after year, with all of the doubting Thomases and everybody else who said it wouldn't, it's proven to be the best financial investment you can make.
Right. Generational wealth that you can pass on to your children.
What's happening right now is absolutely astronomical. I sold my $5 million plus house a couple of years ago. I've had some big homes, some really special places. I had one in La Jolla that is still iconic. I think I sold it for $13 million. So you can take it. What's so incredible is you can take the investment from the very first house I ever owned or ever sold to anybody, or the most expensive, and they're all the same. They all are proportionate value to my estate. And today, the people my age have passed on billions of dollars to their children as a result of home ownership.
Right.
And it's going to continue. We have a scarcity. And it's no different than other things in this world that are scarce. The only difference is that instead of being collectible, it's livable. Ooh, I really like that.
Right.
Instead of being collectible, it's livable. I can enjoy it every day.
Right.
You know, a beautiful watch or
right.
a beautiful
You
car,
collect it.
whatever.
Right.
You know, those are wonderful things, but they don't have the permanence, and they don't have the American dream attached to them. And I'm a fanatic about the American dream. I was thinking, I got up to give a speech, and I've given lots of speeches, and I'm always trying to understand the value of my own content. You know, why would somebody come and listen to me? And I was in Los Angeles, and I was giving a speech not too long. I actually was in Orange County, maybe Newport Beach, and I was giving a speech to 500 people, and they all worked with me. Get that word? See, that's the difference between
work
leadership.
with you.
For me.
Because for me
Right.
is way different than
Right.
with me.
Right.
And
True
so,
leader
yeah.
with me.
So I start things with the Star Spangled Banner still
That's so
today.
good.
We're the same way.
There's no question about it. So I'm playing the Star Spangled Banner, and 6 of my people really, really, really made a big deal and took a knee. Right? And everybody knows that I'm a flag-waving patriot maniac,
Right.
and they took a knee.
Wow.
And you can see the fear go through the room. I mean, it's like, well, what's he going to do? You know,
Yeah, well, I want to hear.
You know, what happens? And so I finished the Star Spangled Banner and got up on the stage, and I said, would the 6 of you that took a knee, would you please come up on the stage?
Oh, no.
Oh, you should see the fear in
Right.
the room. It was like
Oh,
incredible.
here we go.
You know, and I'm.
Did they come up?
They hesitantly came up, and I said, "Could you please take a knee for me again here?" And they did. They were of good conscience. I mean, they
backed it up.
They believed what they
Right.
were doing. And I looked at the crowd and I said, "Well, what happens next?" And the response was, "Oh, you know, you could hear the noise go through the crowd of people who were with me." And I said, "I want you to look at the flag. I want you to look at these men that are on their knees, and I want you to understand that my grandfather went in the United States Marine Corps when he was 14. He fought in World War I. He fought in World War II. He led people through the Korean War. He was in the Marine Corps for 46 years. And he was followed by my father, whose first assignment after being a kid who went to Brown Military Academy in Pacific Beach, right, and met my mother at La Jolla High School, got and went the moment that they bombed Pearl Harbor into the United States Navy, and his first command was United States 1st Infantry Spearhead at Omaha Beach.
Wow.
Right? You're talking to a family of American heroes, and this is my company. And I want you and everyone in this audience to understand that the reason we defended our country like that was so you could take
A
Knee. Right. I
God
agree.
bless
Yeah.
you.
Wow.
God bless you for that.
Ooh. I was going to say yeah, that's what my conclusion would be. The sacrifice from your family, from your dad, from your grandpa, was to give you the freedom
To
to
do
oppose the government and to show opposition without getting hung, your head chopped off, assassinated behind a building. I mean, you see the same shit going on with Iraq. Look what Saddam did to his guys that took
But
a
when
knee.
you explain it in that context, it forms a different narrative for them, that it makes them think to themselves probably that
Yeah, that should be-
yeah, those guys did
There's
that.
two sides.
Yeah, maybe I may not take a knee next time,
Right.
but at least I know
Right.
the reason why I
it-
can do it.
Right.
I don't want to talk politics, but if I had to live the lesson of being my age today and looking back on on everything I've ever done, perhaps I should have looked a little bit more into the other side.
Yeah.
Right, gotcha.
I should have been more open to change. I should have believed that
Open to listening, maybe
Yeah,
not to change,
yeah.
but understanding
but understanding that there's
difference.
a difference and that there's so many good things that the other guys are doing as well. Yeah. So I'm open to it. I believe, you know, that presentation this morning on real estate, you know, whether we're going to become the next Blockbuster, and is there a future real estate company that's going to eclipse everything that we've ever done? My only conclusion from it is that, and I'm making the change, Frank, to be honest with you. I'm going to step out of real estate management and once again become the thing that I am very most fond of in my life. I'm going to become a real estate agent. And,
Really?
And absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh.
Can you come with us for listings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going on.
Close it. We got the closer.
Listen, I'm actually going to a listing presentation after this. The guy's going through a divorce, and he's a little distraught, and he's telling me my house is not in that good a condition. And I go, well, we'll go take a peek at it. We'll see what's happening. So
usually when you're going through
I'm gonna bring
divorce
Steve.
houses, isn't it?
I'm gonna bring Steve with me.
So
Let's go down
let
this one.
Yeah, how would you handle that?
Let me just make
Exactly.
let me just make a comment on that. I quit selling real estate as an agent or as a broker agent in 1989, and some people in the room weren't born then,
Right.
but they're the ones that are making the broadcast possible.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're teaching us.
Shout out to Mark and Greg back
So-
there.
Yeah, thank you
Hey,
guys.
thanks, guys.
So
You guys can't see them, but they're back there.
So when I look at the business and what's happened to it, my first commission, and I know I wander a little bit, but I'll try to make it short. I had gone through the class, got my license, and got to show sailors houses. So I farmed the USS Kitty Hawk.
Nice.
Right, and I could still get on board, and I would talk to them, and I'd do little classes, and I'd get young sailors. And at the time, you had to be an E5, or you could not. There's no way you could qualify to buy a house under any conditions. But I started teaching the youngest guys, the E1s and the E2s, how to become an E5, and then I could get them. So I sold houses on Dictionary Hill. And the first house I ever closed was with a sailor. It was $12,000. The government loaned him $12,900. And my commission, if you would like to calculate that, after my 50-50 split with my broker.
Jeez.
And I'm glad you say geez, because the industry was much more balanced when there was a 50-50 split with the broker, and I made a fortune at the 50 or 60 or 70, and of course today's real estate agents never heard of those numbers. So maybe there were some great things about being a successful real estate agent where the broker you work for was also successful.
Right, absolutely.
Right? It takes a village, it takes a team,
right.
And we're losing the team situation at this point. And but anyway, I made $180 commission. I want to proudly say that of that $180, I paid my mother back $100 for my suit, right? And I paid SDAR $80 in back dues.
Oh, wow.
So
you broke even.
Yeah.
You broke even on your first deal.
Yeah.
Do you remember who the president was back there? Who
knows? You mean the president of SDAR or the president
No, I hope you know the United States president, but the president of SDAR.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I know that it was important to me because, again, I believe that home ownership has been better protected from the local board, from the state, and from the national associations. I don't think we'd have a cohesive real estate business if we didn't have all of the volunteers and everyone who has been a part of SDAR, the other boards. It's such a privilege to know that people are out there working on your behalf.
And that stands for the San Diego Association of Realtors, for those watching.
Greater.
Well, now it's greater. Greater San Diego. I just say San Diego Association. I don't like the G.
Steve, let me ask you a question here. How did you go from being a realtor, making $180, breaking even, to being
the mogul?
The mogul who sold. We'll talk about the company you sold, but how did you get that track? Because there's a lot of realtors, and these realtors want to know because a lot of them
they want to be Steve Games.
They want to be that guy or that girl,
and they're. I don't know if I'm sure there's a few out there.
So in answering the question, it's several-fold, and I think the first thing to say is I perfected being a real estate agent. So as a real estate agent, I even kept working as an agent through when I founded my first brokerage, which was Pickford Realty. and I had a very small group of people who worked for me. Today they would be called a team. Then they were agents in the brokerage. But it was a small group of elite, very successful women. And there's a conversation to be held about why they were women as well. But the last year I actually worked as an agent, my last commission was $630,000. My last commission, one deal. So
that's a nice check.
So it's a road of experience. This is in 1989. So it'd be $1 million.
Whoa.
Yeah, it'd be $1 million, $1.2 million commission. I made close to $2 million as a real estate agent / broker with Pickford Realty in my last year as an agent in 1989. What happened to me was I decided that I wanted to be in management and own and be a leader and help everybody get to where I had already been, right? And continue to do what I was best at. So when you say, are you ready? You didn't ask me, but I'll tell you, am I ready to go back on a listing presentation? I've never stopped going on listing presentations. And the difference between me and all of my competitors was that the agent in my company, as large as they got, I went sometimes on 5 listing presentations in a day. So I would go as the company owner, right? And I would go in support of the real estate agent. I actually went to one listing presentation on a $10 million house in La Jolla with 4 of my agents in the same day.
The same house.
Yeah. The last one, a famous person named Maxine Gellens, was the last person I went into the house with on that particular day. And Maxine got what was happening. And when we sat down with the seller, she said, I know you know Steve. He's been here several times today. And anything he said he'd do for any of the others, he'll do more for me.
Smart.
Now, that was not what I wanted to hear, nor was it the truth. But Maxine was being funny, and we got the listing. And so I was on 2 listing presentations yesterday on behalf of the people at Coldwell Banker West. I literally, on the holiday, went on 2 listing presentations, one at 9 and one at 1 o'clock yesterday. So I could get in a car and go with you on your listing presentation, but I think you can probably pull it off.
I think.
So when we talk about giving, you know, what is it that you gave, Steve? If I picked up Dream Homes magazine as an example, or Premier, 70% of the people in that magazine that are the most successful high-end residential real estate agents in San Diego County are all graduates of
your school,
of my school of giving, and I think they would say that about me, and I'd be very proud.
When you take a listing in the $10 million range, obviously it's different than taking a listing in the $1 million range. What do you give the person as far as what's your marketing budget? Like how do you plan such a how do you beat out the other people? Is it better marketing? You're going to pay for more.
So
it has to be something.
I have 2 different philosophies. Probably 3 or 4 different techniques, and I think they're important to say. First of all, no matter what level you're going on a listing presentation, whether it's at what's the average sales price in San Diego now? 750,
8 something,
around 8.
mid-8.
So I consider anybody who can buy an entry-level house in San Diego to be rich.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's true.
So back to the American dream.
That's true.
My daughter told me one time, Dad, you're going to help me buy a house. I said yes. She said, why don't we buy me a house in Denver? And I said, why? And she said, because I'd be able to buy twice the house in Denver that I could buy in San Diego. And I said, but then you'd be in Denver.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Look at the house and get these other states. I'm like, I don't want to
anybody anybody who's entering the real estate market in San Diego County today deserves to be treated, or anybody who's selling a house needs to be treated as if they're wealthy, successful people who deserve to be the very best that they can have. So when you ask a question of how much do you spend, I'll just give you one example. It depends on whether you're going to get the listing because of your already existing expense, what you've already spent. So you walk into the room, you don't come in naked. You know, if you're going to be a realtor listing $5, $6, $8 million houses, you probably already had to develop a track record. So you're bringing the material that shows what you've already spent.
Got it.
Right? So it builds on itself. You have to invest. I have a great friend in the real estate business who worked for me both at Prudential and at Sotheby's. His name's Peter and Judy Corrente. They've been selling multi-million-dollar houses most of their lives, and Peter just says that the reason he's living in a beautiful home today, and I think Peter's well into his 80s, is because he took 20% of all of the money he ever made and got it out of his spending line, put 10% into marketing and 10% into savings. So good advice.
Got it, yeah.
With that done, I would suspect anybody who wants to ever sell exclusive houses in San Diego County should start taking 10 to 20% of their income and setting it aside for marketing of exclusive properties.
Got it.
When I founded Pickford Realty, where I made so much money as an individual agent, I put 20% of every dime that I made back into marketing, and sometimes as much as 50.
Wow.
And people just look at me like, come on.
Yeah.
We can do it online now. Online is becoming more expensive all the time, right? So what we used to be able to do online for almost nothing now is
You got to pay.
You got to pay.
Yeah, you gotta pay.
And if you make mistakes, it's way worse than having a magazine that
because it
doesn't-
stays forever.
Because at least you have something to be. Yeah.
Right.
So,
right.
So my advice to people is get ready, save, and make the sacrifice to go up. I started selling $12,000 houses to sailors. I made a decision to sacrifice everything to get out of that marketplace and to get into high-end marketplace. I had a very successful agent, one of the most successful in San Diego, who worked for me at Prudential. And he called me. He had done 250 transactions that year. So successful that he was rivaling Maxine, who also was in the company. So they were fighting to be number one, and he was clearly doing it in units, and she was doing it in volume. And they just about meet at the same place, because if you do 300 transactions here and 80 transactions over here, you're going to have the same income.
Gotcha.
Right? It's just what you prefer to do.
Right.
So he called me and he said, Steve, I want to list a $14 million house in La Jolla. Now, today that'd be 25.
Gotcha.
But he wants to list a $14 million house in La Jolla. And I said, well, are you willing to invest? And he said, yeah. And I said, you really should just co-list it with Maxine. You know, it's much smarter for you. You don't have to put the kind of money into it. She has the reputation. He said, but then she'd be number one.
So they're competing.
Yeah. And I said, okay, well, let's make an investment. And I'll go on a listing presentation with you, which because he didn't have a track record in the high end was important. The client that was selling happened to be working in his business in Las Vegas, so we flew to Las Vegas, and I had my agent put together a 2-year, $200,000 marketing campaign. $200,000.
What do you mean? It put together a
Upfront.
2-year.
Upfront.
Oh,
A commitment. Yeah, a
Okay.
commitment
I
for
gotcha.
2 years to be here.
So it's going to be a 2-year listing. And
This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do more publication. I'm going to do more every single possibly marketing tool that you can use. I'm going to spend more money on this than anyone else alive would ever spend. and I want your listing, and I want it now. I want it for 2 years, and I want it at 6%. He said, "Are you crazy?"
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Well, you lost your mind. And I said, "You know what? You need to take this risk. Profit is directly proportionate to risk." John Maynard Keynes, in his original primer book of American economics, profit is directly proportionate to risk. People don't take the risk. Right. So he got the listing. We brought it. We brought our smiles and our happiness back. He was scared of that other word, and he was he was panicked about it. And I said, "Don't worry, we'll get it done." And I showed it to Peter and Judy Corrente, who sold it the next day.
Jeez,
just saved 200 G's
for asking price of $14 million. You see, we bought that listing.
Right.
Right.
There you go.
We pay the price to get those listings. We pay the price to be ready to get those listings. And the reason that my company grew more in volume than it did in units in both companies, in Prudential, Pickford, and with Sotheby's, it's not because those companies from a franchise had some big marketing plan. Right. That was there, and it was great. But we built a marketing plan on a local basis, and all of a sudden, those companies were more visible to the person who was selling the expensive home.
So when you make that $200,000 commitment, like Frank said, there was no money.
You didn't spend it. It was a smart deal.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Well,
you just saved 200
Did you know
Gs.
that you had a possible buyer when you made that $200,000?
Yeah. Well, see that, Frank. That's the point to who you know.
Right. That's the team.
So and it's really important to understand that in the real estate business today, it's not just who's the agent in your company. It's who's the agent in the MLS. It's who's the agent that is marketing. Who can you get to in a cooperative manner? I'm the most cooperative real estate broker ever. I would never, and there's tremendous amount of legal issues about this. There's companies trying to hide their listings all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know about that.
That's so wrong for the client. It's so wrong
for our industry.
For us, whatever rules we have to come up with to keep that from happening, we should.
Well, we can.
Yeah. And
as far as we have 6 months to talk about it.
There's going to be a lot of realtors,
right?
Not just in San Diego, nationwide, that are going to watch this podcast, and there's going to be a handful that are the ones that are on the Kitty Hawk selling to the sailors, and they're going to say, "How do I crack into this? Like, how do I become Steve Games or Maxine Gillen or Greg Noonan or any one of the ones that are in there? Can they crack in?
Or Patty McKelvey? Or,
right.
There's several really good agents out there.
Look at her. I mean,
she's just one a day.
Killing it.
Yeah.
So how does she do that? I mean,
she does it. She does it herself. She's like a fascinating person.
Yeah, she's okay. Good question.
Right.
But I also want to get back to, so we don't lose this thought.
Okay.
Yeah. He had a team of only females. He's going to say, let me tell you a story why they're only females.
Yes.
So I want to go back and say, because it sounds like an important story. It's like, female power,
Correct.
For realtors. Maybe give a shout out for diversity and all that.
Well, and I've got to, you know how cautious I have to be with this because
absolutely,
because everything is at risk today. But
everything you say is going to be.
I believe that my biggest contribution to the real estate business was being an element of change, and because I had struggled so much when I was young, it was always interesting to me to see that who else had handicaps. Right. Who else was handicapped? I was handicapped because the system didn't understand me.
Correct.
Right.
Low grades, all that.
And so I don't. I'm very proud of having been selected through my own racism, by the way. I grew up in a racist society, and by the time I was ready to get out of the military, I think that I would still be considered to be a white racist, right? And I met a person who challenged that for me, and when people challenge me, when the other side is being listened to, you can't believe the racist things that you might have grown up with that are so ridiculous. There's no legitimacy to them, and so I became what was called a crisis intervention specialist, and I spent my last year and a half in the Navy stopping race riots. Was my job, and
wow,
on the ship.
Everywhere, on the ship, off the ship, at the base, wherever there was a race riot going on. And at that time, it was primarily a black and white issue.
Mm-hmm.
And my partner was a powerful black sailor, and I was the white guy. And we risked our lives and did all kinds of extraordinary things to try to change the way that the world viewed equality.
Seems like that ship would be a good macroclimate of people for the first time, racist blacks being on one ship, one town where they couldn't go anywhere. What's going to happen?
Oh, it was
right.
See,
so
the military was having more trouble with racism than they were with
fighting the war.
Fighting the war. Yeah. So the reason I brought that up was because all of a sudden I was in a real estate environment, and the real estate environment had something really unique about it. We had these superstar women that were tremendously successful, and I think even then, even in the mid '70s, the number of successful women in the real estate business was more significant than the number of men, and they had excelled. Well, it was the first place where they were given equal opportunity, and so the real estate business was a place for those kinds of prejudices to be dissolved.
Right.
But it was not dissolved in real estate management. And so when I started to build a company, first the team, because I surrounded myself with the most successful women in my marketplace, and we were equals, and we were able to do incredible things. But my partner, who was a successful woman and a prodigy graduate from Stanford, I brought into the founding of Pickford Realty. And what we did from then on was we took advantage of the fact that every major real estate company in San Diego, maybe in California and in the country, had isolated women from management.
Okay.
So real estate management in the 70s was all men.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I decided was, one, there was a bigger pool of possibility if I started to grow the company with
women.
Women in management, selfish,
right,
but very successful.
Helpful. Right.
And the most famous names in real estate management all worked for Nida and myself at Prudential. So there's still several of them, and I don't, because we're all competitive, I don't want to bring their names up,
right,
because they don't work for me anymore. But they're the most successful women in real estate in management, and we built the whole company. So to put that in perspective, I ended up with 110 real estate offices, right? I ended up with 6,000 real estate agents, and the majority of the management was done by women.
6,000.
6,000.
Who's a broker of record in something like that? Like, how I mean,
that's also a shame, by the way. So I do want to reflect on some pain. I stopped being the broker of record because I got busted, and I was a target.
Right.
Yeah.
And
of course.
I was a target when you're at the top.
Once I became the target, I got busted as the leader of 6,000 people doing $30 billion in business, right? I got busted for improper disposal of paint.
They got you for something.
Yeah.
Come on.
We got lead-based paint.
Yeah.
We found
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's a funny story.
That is funny. That's that's so standard. They keep looking.
Yeah.
He left a paint canister.
And Nida had told me, Nida was my business partner and associate, still is, but she told me years before I needed to stop being a broker. But I was being a broker out of pride.
Right.
Right. And that pride has been taken away in today's situation. You really have to have someone who does absolutely nothing else, who's as competent as they can be, and does not get involved in the day-to-day operation of the company.
Right.
So
would you consider yourself still, like, when I look at real estate now, and of course a realtor, I believe, is always going to be part of a transaction.
yeah.
But obviously, if you're as successful as you are, you had to plan a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. I would imagine, where are we going to take this company? So what's your plan in today's market with AI, with things changing, and the commissions not being paid by the buyer brokers? Where do you see you in 3 to 5 years? Like, how do you picture the real estate business?
So I first of all,
Any change? Some change?
I first of all want to comment on the plan, and then we'll come to the change. My first comment, and everything has to have some humor in it,
Right.
but I decided, because I had been in the Navy, that the best people that I could hire to come in the real estate business with me would be retiring Navy chiefs. Right? They run the Navy, and I had great respect for them, and so I ended up in my beginning brokerage hiring Navy chiefs
To manage the operations or to sell?
to sell.
Okay.
But that's a good question, because they couldn't do either.
Oh.
Right? One, they were
Too disciplined.
They were too disciplined.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah, and they could sharpen pencils like
Right.
nobody you'd ever
Right.
seen in your life.
Right.
And I love them, and I have more respect for people who are Navy chiefs than anything else. But when they get out, they have to break away and not believe that they're running the show.
Ship. Right.
So what I found in all of this stuff was that you can overplan,
Right.
right? You can never overwork. And so I launched a career of massive effort.
That'd be the number one statement from today's interview.
Right.
I love there. You can overplan, but you can't overwork.
I worked. I ended up when I was trying to get, and I was trying to get big by this time, and I ended up with a full-time driver, 2 pilots, 5 assistants, everything that you could possibly imagine, and they had this to say about me. A telephone call comes in, and somebody says, we've got to talk to Steve. How important is your call with Mr. Games? We've got to talk to Steve right now. I've got to talk to him. Well, he has an opening at 5 o'clock. And they'd say, well, I've got to get my kids from school, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. And my assistant, William, would say, no, that's before breakfast.
5 a.m.
Yeah. So I was taking meetings for people who were in my company who needed my help as early as 5 o'clock in the morning and as late as 11 o'clock at night for 6 years.
Right, straight.
Every day. Every day. Weekends were no different than any other day. I was constantly accused of being a workaholic.
Right.
What I was destined to be a success.
Right.
And my plans changed so often that the people around me had to adjust, because a 5-year plan to me would have been disastrous.
Right.
And a 5-day plan was all I could handle. And I understand that we had goals, but it was the now that mattered. It's how hard are you willing to work today because in this business, it's only whether you get the next listing or not.
Right. You're only as good as your last sale.
It's,
right.
And it doesn't matter how big you are.
Yeah.
You're only as good as the next listing you get and the next sale that you make.
Right.
So what's the best way to get into the only way, the fastest way to increase your revenue is to increase the market points in your house. How do you break from that being comfortable with like Claremont houses, $1 million, 800 to $1 million, to say, I want to go into another neighborhood? How do you accomplish that? Get on your team, or could you do it individually? From going to $1 million listings to a $5 million listings, there's almost no way to get in that $5 million listings because you already know.
Okay, my opinion, and it's a dying breed, or maybe it's not. We always talk about, somebody would say that, this is a hard world to raise children in. It's not like it used to be.
They always say that.
It's the best it's ever been.
Yes.
It's so incredible that I get up every day and say, oh my God, another day of brand new.
Right.
And so I think it's important to remember that you have to feel that way. And then how do you make a change? Well, you make a change in who you're around.
That's the important thing.
Right.
That's really important.
So I have a friend who's extremely successful in the title business. His name is Mark, and I was at the Fairbanks Country Club. I was a part of putting the Fairbanks Country Club together, and I was at a table, and the kid who bussed the table was named Mark, and he was so exceptional that I made him leave his business as a busboy and become I first thought real estate agent for me, but he had a commitment to his family that was too high a risk at that time for him. So I put him in my title company, and he rose. He's one of the best title reps in all of San Diego County. So it's who you're around.
Right.
It's impressing people that you might not ever meet. So how do you do that? Start wherever you have to. Ask one of the successful high-end residential real estate agents in your company to let you go to their open houses. Become what my father used to say, you are what you are now becoming. And so exposure is everything. Spend a little extra money, set some money aside to go and be a part of a high-end charity, volunteer, do things that you're surrounded with people with wealth, and find that route. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to break in. Remember,
But not impossible.
No, it's absolutely no less possible today than it was.
Right. Same
It's
rules.
always the same. And somebody will point to somebody and say, well, they had family, or they had this, or they had that. I had nothing. And I can walk into any list. In fact, I did it. We're going to list a very expensive house with one of our Coldwell Banker West agents next week, and I got asked to go on the presentation and just surround yourself with people that know what they're doing. Remember that 50% of a listing that is $5 million is a $2.5 million listing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good.
So give 50% of it away to get the experience.
Right.
Give more of it away if you have to, but take whatever, and remember that your sphere of influence is probably much bigger than you think. You've gone to school with people whose parents are extremely successful. So start looking at the avenues of success to be a part of a higher end world. And then don't ever forget that you come from humble beginnings, and do not ever become so cocky that the person who's the lowest denominator in the marketplace is not the person you want to help
The most.
by the American dream.
Right. That's
Hey,
a great philosophy.
Steve, what's it like, or can you explain when you have this really successful company, which is going to say it was Prudential, correct?
Yes,
You had
it was one of them.
100. But let's talk about this Prudential, and then somebody says,
I want
to buy it. Like, how do you separate from your child that you
your baby.
your baby? You brought it up from nothing,
Right.
and then so tell us what was that process like, and who you sold it to?
Respect for the child is the only way to do it. And when we lose that, we lose the direction that we should have been going and doing it for in the first place. So when I sold Prudential, I sold it out of necessity. And we'll have to come back to where the real estate market is today,
right,
and how that affects, because I don't believe in the way that I did it that anyone can ever do it again.
Right.
Right? So change is occurring. And so what I did was I built a company from blood, sweat, and tears and heart. I made a decision that for me there was a glass ceiling, because I didn't ever graduate or have any degrees or anything. And with banks, you can't make it without a master's degree from Harvard.
Right.
Right.
So I would like to say that I've had that opportunity to talk to the master's degree Harvard Business School
You were a guest
alumni.
speaker?
So
Oh, that's
yeah,
funny.
so everything comes around.
Right.
But the reason I was able to do it was I associated myself with my partner Nida, who was a Stanford graduate, and as far as I'm concerned, she had the ticket.
Right.
I got
Get
you
in.
to get in the door.
So I had the brain to think these things and have no limitations, and NIDA had no limitations with the banks and the people that we needed in order to be able to do it. So we amassed lots of debt, and profit is directly proportionate to risk. And so we amassed a lot of debt. At one time, I remember owing $30 million, right, personally.
To who?
To the bank,
Okay,
right? 30 million, and I was signed on it personally.
Oh, gosh.
that's
Right?
not fun.
And I think that's a low estimate, by the way.
It's a
And
hard signature to put on a document.
yeah,
Personal.
you really have to say how bad
Yeah.
do I want this,
Right.
Right.
and do I believe I can do it? Now, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't believe I could do it, and I didn't believe that things were lined up. But sometimes it's the darkest day that makes it possible, right? And so overcoming objections and dealing with the problems when it's the very darkest. So one day, my lenders flew into town, and they were on I think it was a Gulfstream 4 then, which was probably the most, and they wouldn't come into Jim's Air, right?
Right.
And so Nida and I go out to show them the plan. We owe them $30 million, and we don't think they're there to congratulate
Yeah,
us.
no. When they
Right.
fly in, that's
Right.
And
not
we're,
good.
And we're losing somewhere in the range of $200,000 a week
From what?
from real
Interest.
estate.
yeah.
Okay.
Right. The company is losing $200,000 a week.
Bleeding.
It's a tragic market. It's the worst it's ever been.
What year was this?
And you
Doesn't
know
matter.
what? Yeah, I can't remember.
Right.
It wasn't the worst though.
Yeah, okay.
It gets there. We
other-
all know that there was a year that was worse than any other, but
Correct.
But this was just one of those cycles. And so I'm sitting on an airplane with these guys, and my brilliant partner is explaining to them what we're going to do, and they say, "Look, we've got another idea. We're going to let you just go ahead and close the company," because they were the Prudential Bank, right? And you can close the company, and we're not going to hold you responsible for that debt. We're going to let you walk away from $30 million.
What's that motivation?
And Nida looked at me and said, "I need to tell you something." And I said, she whispered to me, "And then we'll owe the IRS $15 million
Right.
for debt forgiveness." Right?
Right.
And I said,
Thank God for her.
Yeah.
can't do that. So it got worse and it got worse, and they're about to take off, and they're telling me they're going to close the company. And I said, look, guys, you close the company. I'm not going to close the company.
Right.
I'm going to go do something else, But if you want me to close the company, then you've got to give me one more chance. But if you're going to close it, here's the keys. And I knew what I was up to, and I gave them the keys to 100 real estate offices. I set them on the table, and I said, you go close them. I said, and if you think $30 million is a lot of loss, you're going to lose $300, $400, $500 million when I, as the number 1 prudential broker in America,
Step out.
right?
Open up another place.
Has failed.
Just
the
optics.
cataclysmic event
Right.
that's going to happen when everybody
Massive
who believes
landslide.
I'm the toughest that's ever been,
Right.
And I failed, they're going to drop like flies. And he said to me, what would you do? And I said, I'd fly back to Newark, New Jersey and get me another $5 million, and I'd get it by next Monday because we can't keep the doors open unless you do. And they invested another $5 million. Brilliant move. And we ended up making all of that money back and making them a whole bunch of equity participation and huge amounts of money when we sold to Berkshire Hathaway, which was only 5 years later. So you got to get through the darkest day. What happens when you sell?
That must have been just a crappy meeting to sit there and have to listen to
my
that
God.
stuff. You're
Oh,
just
How'd
like,
you pull that? Did you make that up
Oh,
while you
yeah.
were sitting there?
Oh yeah, I'm making it up while I'm talking to you. You've got to.
So you got to be quick
So there was a guy named
and ballsy.
There was a guy that did the OJ trials. His name is Spence something or other. He's an attorney who critiqued the OJ trials, and he's very successful. He's written a number of books, and in his book he talks about the fact that he's going to his first capital trial, and so he's defending a human being for their life, right? And he believes he's innocent, and he's going to make his summation. He's worked hour after hour after hour after hour to create the summation, and he's in front of the judge and the jury, and he's got his notebook, and he's got it on a podium, and he makes a mistake that he knocks it off the podium, and the papers all end up all his notes are on the floor, and he's trying to put it back together, and this guy's sitting over here watching him, whose life is what they're working on, right? And he literally tries to get his papers back together. And so he stands up, he goes back to the podium, he leaves his papers on the floor, and he gives the greatest summation that anybody ever gave to defend somebody's life in history. And the guy gets acquitted. Well, how did he do that?
Right.
Well, he did it because he prepared the papers,
right.
so many times that he knew every word of them. So when I go on a situation like that, I literally have spent years and years and years preparing this summation.
Right.
And
wisdom.
Yeah. And when I go on a listing presentation tomorrow, I will work harder than the guy that's going for the first time.
Right.
I just won't do it in front of the client. That's all. I'll prepare every single thing. I walk in. I used to say I used to have to kick the door because I brought so much shit with me. Right. And I do. I still do today. I come in with reams of stuff that the people might never look at. Why do I bring it? Well, one, if it's left on the table when they meet the next realtor, it's intimidating, right? And number two, it's because I'll never get a chance to tell them everything I can do for them. They can look at it later.
Right.
But it gives me confidence.
Yeah.
And I walk into the presentation with massive confidence.
How do you get those listings?
I
mean, there must be a machine. It can't be just your sphere of influence. It has to be like, hey, there's somebody who wants to sell their house. They called.
It's reputation, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I go on a high-end listing presentation for Coldwell Banker West, it typically is someone in the company who has knowledge and a reputation. For me, it's going to be right back, and I'm going back to being a team with my wife and myself. We're going to be a high-end residential real estate team, and she has a tremendous successful career in the high-end business.
Wow.
And we're going to go back, and I'm going back purely because of the economics. I can make more money as a high-end residential real estate broker working for Coldwell Banker West than I can being a owner manager of Coldwell Banker West.
Right.
Right. And that's what they were talking about this morning.
But I also think I've met you before, and I mentioned that earlier. But I also think you like it. Like you just.
Well, of course.
I mean not like it. I mean, I think you like to help people. Like I just get that about you. You just like to help people.
Yeah, the giving.
It's not
part.
like it. It isn't liking it. It's loving
No,
it.
right. That's right.
It's believing in it.
Right.
It's
Living
believing that the best thing that somebody can do is give you a listing for more commission and more time than they would give anybody else. See, I not only just get listings. I get listings at 6%. Right? I get listings way higher than the discounter that I'm up against all the time because I'm willing to pay the price to give them what the other person's not willing to give. Nothing frustrates me more than when I go on a listing presentation with any of the companies I've been with and the agent has already written in 5%. Are you kidding me? What would I ever do that?
Got it.
If I
leave it blank.
And if I'm not going to ask for 6%, right? Remember, this is not dictated by any. It can't be. I can go in and ask for 6%, and I can ask for 6%. People say, "Well, you'll never get that on a $10 million listing." That's not true. You'll never get it if you don't ask for it.
Right.
That's like somebody. I remember I used to follow some agents, some other companies around, and I was big on things like the Wall Street Journal. And I'd say, I'm going to put your property in the Wall Street. I'm still big on the Wall Street Journal. Said, I'm going to put your property in the Wall Street Journal. And they'd say, well, the other broker said that things don't sell from the Wall Street Journal. And my answer was simple. Nothing sells from the Wall Street Journal that isn't in it.
Right.
Right.
It's that simple. So if you can get 6%, right, your entire marketing plan can be carried by the 1% that the other broker gave away.
Right.
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 Yeah, it's like math. It's simple math.
And if you end up with 5% or you end up with 4.5%, right, even if you take it at that, at least you already gave. So that when it gets to the point where the transaction's being negotiated, you've already said, when we get to the point where the transaction's being negotiated, based on the fact you've already negotiated with me, I can't give up anymore.
Gotcha.
So everything you do on a listing presentation is about how your life is going to end. Right? It's about the end of the story for that listing. And if you blew it when you were getting the listing, you'll never enjoy the story. It just can't happen. And so the truth is, though, and I want to make this clear, I'm going back in the residential real estate business as an agent team because the pendulum swung. The agent team can make so much more money than the broker can.
Right.
That unless you already have an existing organization like Peter has, right, and it works great. But startup, the whole way that we're looking at real estate is changing dramatically. Look at the success of EXP. Right. I don't want to be at EXP, right? But their success is absolutely astronomical. So what about Compass? What about all the new ways that people are doing it? Well, from my perspective, it's public money now. See, and if you can't do it with public money, I did it with private borrowed money. That's never gonna. I really believe it won't ever happen again.
Right.
Right. No.
Right?
That ship has sailed.
Yeah, and I then look at where is the big money, and it's the same place that the superstars in the business are now looking at it. It's working for a brokerage that does all of your support, takes all of your risk, right? It's working for them and making 90% of the commission as opposed to 10. So I have to go back.
So
Otherwise, I'm wasting my time.
Will you be going on listings in La Jolla, University City, or just in the South?
Are you trying to trick me?
No, I'm.
All right, because I want to tell you
Because you can sell houses anywhere.
that the answer to that is really significant.
Because I'm sure some of the agents are going to go,
Uh-oh.
damn, look at our competition
They
now.
better. They better. Or,
Like, oh,
or,
man.
Like, why is he coming here?
Yeah,
Oh,
I should
God.
Stay in La Jolla.
They better, or I should go take a nap.
Right,
Right.
You know,
exactly.
but there's always been agents who feared me, right? Most of them didn't know me. And what's interesting is when I come to a presentation like this, or I go out in the world and I have dinner with somebody who's only heard about me, I'm much more of an ass than I really am.
Right.
You know, in their minds, I'm I'm the devil in some way or another. And I'm really, really a nice person.
I've never heard someone call you the devil, by the way.
No.
Because I asked about you years ago, and just to let you know, your reputation's impeccable from the people I spoke to.
It is, but
you're hardcore.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you look, even though you're in the Navy, you look like a Marine.
Yeah, and
You know what I mean? Does he look
Like his dad.
a soldier?
He looks like his dad.
Like he'd kick
His
your
dad was
ass.
a
I
Marine.
have to tell you, I went
Yeah.
to my grandfather.
Don't piss him off.
I went to my grandfather and I said, should I go in the Marine Corps? And it was 1968,
Oh,
67 actually.
that would have been a.
He said, should I
no.
go in the Marine Corps? And he said no, and he walked away from me. And I loved him. I learned to sing the Marine Corps hymn sitting on his lap before I learned any other song in history. I can quote you word for word the Marine Corps hymn, and I love it. And I want to be a Marine, right? So I go the second time, I say, Grandfather, should I be a Marine? And he said no. And so the third time I walked up to him and I say, Grandfather, I'm offended. Why don't you want me to be a Marine? And he looked at me, he said, Steve, because you're a candy ass.
Oh.
You?
Kick you in the balls.
Right.
And
Not tough enough.
And in truth, what he was saying was, please don't get killed.
Right. Exactly.
He said that the Marine Corps has got a higher
You're gonna hesitate.
possibility. He said he literally told me later if I'd said I want to go in the Army, he would have told me the same thing.
Right.
He wanted me to go in the Navy because I was smart enough, and he thought that I would not risk my life. And of course, I did anyway.
Right.
But for all intents and purposes, he didn't want the pain.
Right.
Yes.
You don't want the pain of
And
losing
so
you.
when we respect Marines, I have more respect for Marines than Marines have.
Yeah.
Right.
I love Marines.
And I have more respect for the special services and the Navy SEALs and all of those things. I mean, it's inconceivable what they do.
Right.
And you know, our job should be in every way, shape, or form is to support our military. Right. And that's something I'm looking forward to doing personally as I get back in the real estate business.
Good.
Right.
Because we have more veterans, successful veterans
that need
running
help.
successful businesses and new veterans in San Diego County than any other place in America. Mm-hmm. So the VA has changed some stripes, for lack of a better term. They've gotten much better rather than much worse.
Right.
And I don't think the average veteran, and particularly the older ones that are from my generation of Vietnam and et cetera, realize what an asset they have. You know, we closed a $4 million 100% VA loan.
How much?
$4 million.
$4 million.
Whew.
$4 million 100% loan.
Listen to that, military.
Yeah,
that's good to know. That is a big
I'd
change.
love to tell you again. I'm going to do a seminar for military veterans, right, and active military, and I want to teach them from that same kid that I sold the $12,000 house to the guy who's buying a $12 million house. There's still some gratitude that can be taken advantage of in your life that you get for having served.
So basically, when you first started this, you said you're in the Navy. But you didn't say that it was during the Vietnam War.
It was.
So, welcome home.
Well, thank you.
I really appreciate that. And it doesn't matter if you're in a foxhole or if you're on that ship. You guys kicked ass. I don't think the politicians did, but I think the soldiers won the war. The politicians lost the war. And I respect anyone who was in that war. And
See,
I
Frank,
also want to say,
see, I am a person who gets up every morning and justifies all of our lives. And so I don't believe we lost the war.
I don't either.
No.
So let me tell you, history may say that we lost the war. History may say that we all got treated poorly when we got back. My experience was that it was 10-1. For everybody who hated me, there were 9 people who supported me in every way possible.
Got it.
So history always speaks about the worst thing that happened. And I don't mean to minimize it, because for some people it was a horror that they couldn't overcome.
Right.
And nobody should have been treated that way. But from my perspective, there was more good and more Americans who supported us in their homes and in their businesses and in helping us grow than there were those who were on the intolerant side, because they knew that we were there doing what we needed to do.
Correct.
And that it was the government who was determining whether it was right or wrong. We didn't know.
Exactly.
So
17, 18 average age.
yeah. So let me espouse the only thing that I believe would be debated about the Vietnam War. I'm going to try to tell you that it was one of the most important things that ever happened, because we slowed the unimpeded growth of communism so much for so long that it allowed for what eventually was the Berlin Wall coming down, and the fact that technology had caught up to tell the world by the time that we were jumping over that wall, quite frankly. And I believe that stopping communism in its tracks, even though we didn't stop it altogether, we impeded it to the point where the world is a different place.
Yeah,
and that every single person who died in the Vietnam War can and their families can hold respect for them, because what they did was, in fact, in the big picture, valuable.
So, Steve,
you asked me a question. Do you want me to answer it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good one, but this is another question. I'm sorry for
remind us to come back to what happens when you sell.
That was a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's important to me.
Yes. So really, what happens, not only from a financial standpoint, but what happens to you personally when
you let it go?
You let it go, and you're like, because this was, like you're saying, I'm working 10, 12, 15 hours a day, and now there's this void. How do you deal with that?
2 things. First of all, let's deal with the sale. Here you are. You've created something that you're proud of, that you believe in, and you created it with your personality, your heart, your individuality, all of that sort of stuff. So I won't name names, but when I sold to Berkshire Hathaway, my partner and I sold to Berkshire Hathaway because of that love. So what happened if I sold to Warren Buffett's company was that they were going to require me to be the CEO for the next 5 years. So although I took less money to sell to Warren Buffett, I protected the organization
so you
for
stayed
much longer.
Oh, okay.
So even though you sold, you were still in charge.
That's right. I ran the company with my partner Nida. We ran the company for 5 more years. Right. So I bought 5 years.
Right.
Right, where I was doing what I loved the very most. And I sold to somebody who I believe paid me $50 million less for the company than it was worth. But I made it all back during that 5 years that I worked for probably the most famous person or company in the world to sell to that respects the people who sold and built the company.
Right.
So that's his formula, and that's why him. Right?
So he kept you on.
He did.
Well, he's smart. I mean, you get the package. Who built it?
Yeah.
He did. I would make it mandatory that he stayed there as part of the deal.
And when I was done, when I got 4.5 years or so, NIDA, my partner, NIDA, decided to stay and was the CEO longer than that. So the company was our company up until NIDA left or I left, and then philosophy changed. It became corporate. It made all of those things. For better or for worse, they have a higher percentage of profit than we had because it's more corporate.
Right.
But they make less money than we did because it's less
corporate.
entrepreneurial.
Right.
I got you.
So there's two schools of thought. If I hadn't sold, the company would have collapsed because I sold after 9/11, and I sold as soon after 9/11 as I could because I had a fear that didn't happen, by the way. But 9/11 was the most devastating single event in the history of my life, right? And maybe everybody else's,
right?
and certainly my business life. And so what I was afraid was if there was a bombing. Now, by that time, I was in Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, Orange County, San Diego, Cabo San Lucas, Puerto Vallarta. I had offices in 2 different countries, and I was massive. And my fear was that Los Angeles was the next target, right? And if they took out Los Angeles with an overhead of what I believe was right around $10 million a month, right? And nobody showed up to buy real estate for a year or 6 months or a year and 6 months, my inability as a private individual to carry that would have destroyed all of the dreams that we built. So I took the path of least resistance that was the best for everybody in the company.
Got it.
So what happens to you personally until I basically retired after my 4.5-year tenure with Berkshire Hathaway, after I left there, I wandered. I spent a lot of money. I did a lot of crazy things. I retired. I had wealth. I had prestige. I had everything. I tried other ventures, but what I found was that retirement is a death wish.
Sentence, right?
God, it's so true.
For someone like you and me and Mark.
But so many people keep looking towards retirement. I can't wait till I retire. I can't wait till I retire.
So I went back and I lived next to the person who became my partner, Brian Arrington. I had that beautiful home, the old Peckham mansion I had rebuilt.
Right in Point Loma there?
Yeah, it's perhaps the most beautiful.
Yeah.
For me, it's one of the most beautiful
nice.
houses in San
Brian's
Diego.
house was nice too.
Yeah, his house
right
is
there on the
beautiful.
water.
Yeah,
right.
well, they're right next to each other. And I met Brian and suggested that I could help him with his real estate business.
Right.
And the rest is history. We built Sotheby's into the #1 real estate company again in San Diego County. So to me, retirement's not in the picture.
No.
Retirement is not an option.
Yeah.
Because what are you going to do when you retire? I mean, what do you do? Sit around how long can
Some
you sit
people
at a
like to
beach?
fish.
And I'd encourage anybody.
Well, you can still fish and work, right?
Oh, but I fish.
Yeah.
I love to
exactly.
I'm a great fisherman.
I love fishing too.
And you always find time.
Right.
But how much time do you need to fish?
Right, exactly.
You know,
how many fish are you going to kill?
Yeah. And now I'd rather be on a gaff or
exactly.
coaching the guy that's
Right.
that's catching anyway.
Exactly.
And it's tag and release, and it should be. And those are, out in front of I have a small resort that I built in Mexico, and I built it as my home when I retired. So
Which is,
I went berserk.
We're in Mexico.
It's
Scorpion Bay?
It's outside of La Paz.
Okay.
It's 34 miles south east of La Paz on the Sea of Cortez. I bought 4,700 acres. I bought 7 miles of oceanfront. 7 miles. It's
Do you still own it?
We're going to Mexico.
Do you still own it?
It's exactly the same size as the city of La Jolla.
How do you do a deal with Mexico like that?
Oh, it's
without being worried.
Frank, that's a whole
another story. That's another podcast.
class because
that's what
all
we have to
of
learn.
the myths about Mexico are wrong. when I had trouble with title in my life, it's been here, not there, right?
Gotcha.
So the whole idea you can't own property in Mexico is 100% wrong, and we could have a whole class on it.
Right.
It's kind of like value range is stupid.
Well, we need to have a class on that.
You remember that?
Yeah, value range
Remember
is
that?
stupid.
Value range is stupid.
Right.
Let me tell you how many properties my people have sold in San Diego and gotten the seller more money with that stupid value range. Right. So I was the person who created
You
that.
did? Oh, you did.
Yeah.
We use that all the time.
Well, explain that.
Yeah.
To explain what value range is, 'cause some people don't know, because other people are listening.
I mean, you have a home, the person says, how much you think we can get? And you give them like, you can get between this and this. And so you put this and this on the market and you go somewhere in between there. And hopefully you get a little bidding war and it drives it up.
Correct.
So thousands
Is that
and
right?
thousands
Explanation?
yeah, thousands. Pretty good.
Okay. Not perfect, but.
Thousands and thousands of listings have been lost because of what the agent should understand they're in, which is the price argument, right? So the first thing that value range does is it compromises the price argument, because everybody wants to get a higher price for their property, and oftentimes what happens is the agent, out of fear, lists it at a higher price than it should be listed at. It wanes on the market, or the seller turns down the very first offer, right? Because it's not close enough to their asking price, and then regrets later that they didn't take it.
Correct.
Because their asking price was not right. Right. So value range was designed by a sort of an idea of it was used in Australia, which is where we got it from, and then I brought it and institutionalized it in the U.S. Through great personal harm. I had to go to
convince everyone.
Most of all, I had to go to the Board of Realtors numbers of times, and then I ended up with who are the people in charge of real estate in California? The
CAR?
No.
Department of Real Estate?
Department of Real Estate.
Right.
I ended up in front of them having to justify and to explain value range marketing.
So you brought that in?
Oh, yeah.
I had no
absolutely.
idea.
Yeah.
I always thought that was a good idea.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, because you're
used
right.
I used it yesterday.
I've never heard it till right now. It takes out the pricing argument.
It does.
It just because that's always what it is.
Yeah.
Hey, my friend says I can get this, and you're saying I can get this, and this person
and you
says
lose the listing because of the pricing argument.
Right.
So one, it gets you the listing.
Right.
Two, it gets it sold.
Right.
And just as an example, I list a house at $20 million. Okay.
You'd value range a house like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's where it's best.
Okay.
So I list a house at $20 million, so we listed from 18 to 22. Right?
Right.
That's so much smarter than listing it at 22 to start with. Right?
Right.
And in a $20 million house, what is valuable is much more discretionary. So beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. So if you don't get the beholder,
you're out.
You don't get to show the beauty.
Right.
So I would love, by the way, to do a value range marketing class here.
I'll set it up.
Again.
It's not a problem. I would like you to do two. If you could do the Mexico thing, because what you just told me, I believed.
Yeah.
You can't buy property in Mexico because the leases are bad, and I have all these thoughts. I just heard.
I vice chair the international committee.
He's
I'll
a
make
vice
sure it
chair.
Well, let's do it together.
Okay. So also, but
I can do it from the street aspect,
right.
And you can do it from the.
In fact,
legal
I'm a guest speaker tomorrow, by the way, in Tijuana, at the a big real estate emporium event, and they have me as one of the guest speaker on the panel. I don't speak Spanish, but they say you don't
less
have
tequila this time.
Yeah, so that's going to be fun.
All right, I have a question I want to ask Steve, because this is for the kids out there. There's a lot of kids in high school that are very similar to you, that they're not really scoring high in math. They're not scoring high in reading, and they're drifting a little bit. This COVID pandemic shutdown really did a number on a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And you went into the military for 8 years. So what would your suggestion be?
I wouldn't recommend that, by the way. I'd go into the military for 4.
Okay.
Or,
but what would your recommendation be to some kid who's not really on the college track and maybe not even on the trade school track, just kind of what would you recommend?
I want to make that's a question that
it's a tough one
that has to be answered with respect for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So,
boys and girls, I'm including.
If I was graduating from high school, and I also want to include graduating from junior college or graduating from college or graduating with a master's degree, I'm going to tell everybody a secret. It would make so much more sense to take those tickets, right? And that's what I call those university diplomas. Take those tickets and go into real estate than any other career. So whether you're the kid that is struggling in high school, right, or whether you're the kid graduating from Stanford, the best place in the world to make money and have the best career and the happiest life you can have is in the residential real estate business. I have a nephew who I sent through 9 years of school. When he got all through school, he didn't want to be the attorney he had gotten a license to be. With passing everything, the bar, all the rest of that stuff, he didn't want to be the scientist that he had the degrees to be. He wanted to do what he was best at, which was gaming. Right? He plays games better than anybody else, which is really coding, so he works for Netflix.
Wow.
Right? And he's tremendously successful, but he's one out of hundreds of kids that have all of these degrees and haven't found their place.
Right.
And get literally work like slavery in places where the system eats them up. It's much less dangerous to go out and try to work right out of high school than it is to get a master's degree and go out and get turned down.
Right.
My God, you feel like you did all of this, and now there's no, So my suggestion is always to young people, figure out a way to go to junior college. Right? Don't do what I did. Get through high school. Meet some realtors. Meet some great realtor companies. Get in any kind of a association with them. Work your summers with them. Work in the back room. Help assist a really great real estate agent. Any of those kinds of things. But get through junior college, because today in California, if you can get through junior college, right, you can automatically, if you have a reasonable set of degrees, go to San Diego State.
Correct.
So get. No one should take my route, right? People will say, "Well, you did it without." Oh, don't you believe it? I went to. Once I got back, I had to go through all the education that everybody else had to. I just had to do it at night with no fun.
Right.
I got you.
Have the fun. Go out and get through the university, but don't you dare just waste that time. There's a lot of people that I believe, and it's a pet peeve with mine, that are in school just
wasting time.
Wasting time.
Yeah, weird.
Learn everything you can. Go to every class you can. Absolutely study as hard as you can, because you will later. Mm-hmm. And I said, my life changed on an aircraft carrier in a library smaller than this room, right? After working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3.5 months, I was in the library and I got John Maynard Keynes' book on economics. And I opened it up and I read it, right? And I read, profit is directly proportionate to risk John Maynard Keynes, I closed the book and went out and took the risk, right? That's an extraordinary bit of luck. I don't think you ought to do luck. I gave a commencement speech to all the kids that were graduating from junior college at the Jenny Craig Center, and you know what commencement speeches are like, right?
Of course.
Nobody wants to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to go. Everybody wants to be gone. So the whole Jenny Craig Center is filled. And I got the professors from all the junior colleges there, and it's a big event for me. And I'm proud to get up there. So I walk up. Everybody's waiting to party.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody wants to be there.
Right. Like, oh no.
And they got to listen to me. So I walked up and I said, my name is Steve Games, and I am an alcoholic. I woke the whole place up. Right. Everybody started paying attention, right? Just immediately. And I turned around to the dean of colleges for San Diego and all the rest of that. And I looked at her and sorry, wrong room. Yeah. Right? And I got everybody's attention.
That's it.
Right. So I told two stories, and I'd like to share them with you because we probably conclude. And
okay.
Frank, both of you, thank you so much for having me here.
It's an honor. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You told me when I met you and you said you'd do my podcast and you shook my hand, and you really did, and then you really came here. My level of respect for you from meeting you for 5 seconds, having a coffee, has just skyrocketed. Well, every once in a while you get hit like that, and you did it. So thank you.
So I'm going to give a commencement speech, and my credibility is that I sold companies and had huge successes, made a lot of money. I made a lot of money. And so I'm in front of everybody, and everybody knows that, at least in my head, everybody knows that I didn't go to school and I didn't do well and so forth. And so I'm talking to kids who are halfway through, right? But they've got through junior college, which I think I emphasized, how important it is not to just you can get into junior college no matter what you did in high school.
Right.
And so talking to these kids, and I said, look, I want to explain to you about Johnny. And Johnny was having a tough time in his life, and he decided that he was losing everything, and he lost his family, and he lost his job, and he lost his money, and he lost his courage and everything else. And in a short time, he decided that there was only one hope left. And that was he needed to win the lottery. And so he prayed and prayed and prayed. And this, by the way, is at the Catholic University.
Yeah.
And I said, he prayed and prayed and prayed, and he asked God, help him, and it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. And he kept praying he was going to win the lottery. So he decided he's just in the wrong cathedral. He needs to go to a bigger cathedral. So he goes to the biggest cathedral he can find, and he's on his knees, and he's praying to the Lord to let him win the lottery. And this giant booming voice comes out of the top of the cathedral and says, Johnny, do me a favor, buy a ticket.
Can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket.
So you just graduated from junior college, and it's your ticket. It's your ticket to life. If you want to go out now, go out now. If you want to go on, get another ticket. But whatever you do, don't believe you're in the game. You only have the ticket to go to the game.
Got it.
Right.
That's it. Now you have to prove that you're willing to take the risk, to beat the standard, to continue to get educated, to take the risk and go out and win. Right? And that's cool. That's what I want you to do. And standing ovation. I mean, people went crazy about it. And I said, but wait, I have the other story to tell you. Now that you have your ticket. And he said, what's the other story? And you could hear the crowd. They want to hear it. They didn't want to leave. They wanted to actually hear me. And so I said, I got to tell you about a commander that I went to listen to after the Vietnam War who had been a prisoner of war for 6 years. And out of respect and out of love for my country and the military and people who've sacrificed, I went to listen to him. And it was an emotional speech, and I listened to him, and I appreciated him, and at the end of his speech, everybody could line up and shake hands with him. And so I got in the line to line up, and now I've got this crowd out there, and they're listening to me, and they don't know anything about the war and all the rest of this. And I said, like, I got in line, and the guy in front of me is really quiet, and he gets up and he looks at the commander. I'm next. He looks at the commander. He shakes his hand, and he says, "Commander, do you remember me?" And the commander looks at him and says, "No, I don't recognize you. Should I?" And the guy starts to turn away, and he walks away, and he looks back. He just walked away from the commander, and he looks back, and he says, "I wish you'd remembered me," and walked away. And before he got out of the room, the commander shouts out, excuse me, but why should I remember you?" And the man looked at him and said, "Because I'm the one who packed your parachute." And I turned to the 3,000 people that were in the Jenny Craig Center for the 600 kids that were graduating. And I said to the kids in the center, I said, "Stand up and salute these people.
Right.
They packed your parachute."
That's right.
Right? Or you wouldn't have your ticket. And the place went
Nuts.
wild. Went absolutely wild. And they'll never forget it. They will tell that story.
I can picture right now when you're
That's a good
saying it.
story.
And what you need in your life is to find people around you at any level of wealth that you can introduce yourself to that'll help you pack your parachute.
That's the best.
That's a good ending. I have one thing to say. I would a request. This is your assignment. You need to write a book because you have what's missing in real estate. I see in our industry, and currently I'm the president. 2023. Yeah. What we lack here is not rules, regulations, laws. We lack wisdom, and you cannot. There's not people we can talk to that have the wisdom that people like you have.
Well,
so
that's such a compliment.
Just think about it, because it's your stories. It's the wisdom in your stories that no one else can tell.
But until he writes that book,
yeah, we got to get it back.
We have the podcast.
We have the
and
podcast.
the podcast. When it's going to be a lot of people going to listen to it, and we do these things called reels where we take segments out. The guys
Mark,
over
but
here.
he knows what reels are. I mean,
So let me give you a teaser.
He knows what YouTube is. Okay,
Well,
he's been around, but he knows what's up.
Let me give you a teaser on something.
There's a thing called the internet.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to be back.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
And let me tell you, there's a guy who just came to work here. I think his name is Howard Kurtz.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, good guy.
Super cool.
And I've known Howard, and he's helped me with things for 30 years.
Right. Love
Right?
Howard.
And
Howie.
he's a special guy. And one day he called me, and he said the boss wants you to come to breakfast, and his boss was a guy named
Was it Copley or Manchester?
no, I'm getting my it was Gene Klein.
Okay, I remember him.
It wasn't Gene. Gene's another one of my guys. Let me think of his name. But anyway,
Morgan?
I'm supposed to come for the boss, right? And I show up at a breakfast, right? And the boss is there, and he's invited me because he thinks that I'd be right for the table. Now, all my life, I have had two dreams. One is that I walked into a room and everybody in the table is so much smarter than me that I don't understand what they're saying, and I embarrass myself and my family.
Mm-hmm.
Second one is that I can't, and I'm going to be left behind because I can't tie my shoes. Right? So there are some kids that should relate to the fact that they've been left behind because they couldn't tie their shoes. Right? And there are people who live in fear that the people in the room are going to be much smarter than them. So I walk in, and the boss is Herb Klein, right? And Herb is in my estimation one of the most kind, wonderful, powerful people in the world.
Yeah, I met him.
He was probably one of the most important. He happened to be a Republican. He could have been a Democrat, but he was one of the most influential people in who was going to become the next president, or who was, or any of that kind of stuff. He was the editor-in-chief of the Copley Press, right? So he'd a man. And Herbert invited me to breakfast, and I've shown my ID, and I sit down at the table for breakfast with Herb and Henry Kissinger.
Wow.
Really?
And George Bush.
Well,
as the acting president. He's the president at that time, George Sr., and Colin Powell.
Are there?
Are all at the table.
Nice breakfast.
Right?
Wow.
And so I do what I always do, and what should bring us back to the microphone a few times. I'm sitting with these people, and I always ask the important people that I've met in my life, and like Ralph Lauren or whoever it was, I can relate some really great stories to how people were successful, but these guys are it. Right. And so Colin Powell is in his complete military uniform. He's the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time. He's the most impressive single human being I've ever sat in a room with. He makes Henry Kissinger and George Bush look like shadows in comparison to who this powerful man is in my mind. Right. So I'm having breakfast with him, and I said to each one of them, I did not talk or get the opportunity to talk to Kissinger in the same way, but I asked Powell. I said, General, could you tell me a story about something that nobody's ever read about you, the book, so to speak? And he hadn't written his book yet. And I said, could you tell me a story about something that you think is funny and intelligent to talk about, because I'm a storyteller and I'd like to tell a story about you that nobody's heard. He said, certainly. And I said, well, General, what's the story? And he said, I was in the room with George and Henry, right? And the other person at the table was President Gorbachev. He said, and I was looking at Gorbachev, and Gorbachev is talking, and he stops and he looks at me and he says, General, he says, you have to quit bad-looking me.
Oh.
And General Powell says, I'm not bad-looking you. And he says, yeah, you're bad-looking me. He says, I'm not going to stay in the meeting if you keep bad-looking me. He says, it's just not going to work that way. And Powell says, okay, I won't bad. He says, but you were bad-looking me. And he says, and I know why. And Powell says, why would I bad-look you? And he says, because that from the day you put on that uniform until the day I'm sitting here in front of you, I have been your only enemy. I am who you have fought through your entire military career. I am the enemy. And Powell said, okay. Because it's not debatable. In Powell's career, that's who it was. You know, that was it. And Gorbachev looks at him and he says, okay. He says, no reason to bad-look me anymore. I am here surrendering the world to you. You won. Wow.
So that's a true story?
I am, yes. Ooh. He says, I'm here surrendering the world to you. You won. And Powell felt he quit bad-looking him. And at the end of the meeting, he turns to him and he says, goodbye. And Gorbachev looks at him and he says, oh, and by the way, he says, you're lost now because you don't have an enemy. But he said, the three of you will find one really soon.
Oh, God. Right. And what happened next?
The rest is history.
Right.
So they're gonna have a meeting, and my friend Herb Klein says to me, it's time for Steve to leave. He can't be in the rest of this meeting. He said, and he says, George, do you this is President George. He says,
Right.
George, he says, do you know why I brought Steve to the meeting? And President George Bush looks at all of us and looks at me, and he says, I'm sure I know why. And you hit on it just earlier. And he says, well, why did I bring him? And President Bush says, because he's the only funny friend you have.
There you go. Right. Entertainment.
Right.
And I
Wait, all those guys.
So my life has been about those kinds of learning experiences and respect and people that most people don't come in contact with. And why don't they? They don't get out, work hard enough, and show up. You know,
Right.
If there's one last lesson to learn, whenever you get invited to anything, or you get asked to speak, or you get a chance to be on a podcast, take the damn chance.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Take
That's
the
what I want.
chance.
If you want to go to Mexico, I'm in.
Yeah, absolutely. There's
100%.
no question about it.
I'm not worried. Let me ask you one more thing, because those people you just mentioned, was this before or after the invasion of Kuwait?
5 hours before.
What?
That's what it was about.
So 5 hours. So
I don't know whether it's 5 hours
Right.
or 15 or 20.
So they were talking about.
That's the meeting I couldn't be in.
Wow. Yeah, because that picture reminds me of not Iraq. They just got Kuwait, and they got that row of cars, whatever,
Right.
the death row.
You know, it
That's crazy.
you know, I'm so bad, Frank, with time.
Right, I am too.
I know that what they did in the next meeting was launch a war.
Wow,
Right.
that's heavy.
Right.
And I know that they were right. I didn't need to be in the meeting.
Right.
So I look at the times and the people that had the power that abused it.
Right.
You know, I look at a thing called absolute power. And absolute power means that you can circumvent the rules. And there's lots of people with absolute power.
Yes.
And I recommend that we as human beings with compassion stay as far away from them as we can.
Right.
I don't desire to be that important. It has to be.
You are. I think you have a lot to pass on. I think you're doing it. I'm really proud of you, by the way. I have a lot of respect for you because you are there to help people, especially veterans and kids. And I like your background that you didn't know where to go. I kind of had the same thing. I really didn't fit in high school. Grades were like average, but I'm like, what am I going to do? But I did what you said. I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to jump into college and see where that takes me. And meeting in the relationships I met as opposed to the classes is where I built, you know, a place to be successful and got motivated. So thank you for that.
So Frank, I did my last. Now I'm wanting all your help because I'm going back to be the people that I'm most proud of. I'm going to be one of them. I'm going to be a real estate agent on a team in the most important time in history to sell the American dream. I'm going to do that, but I cannot emphasize enough that we have to keep talking to each other.
100%.
And we have to share these stories
Right.
because without them, without history, there is no future.
Correct. I believe that with the industry too. Just to do a shout out, we have a few associations in San Diego. My goal as the president is also to stop with the silos and start making a community for the industry. You know, we have to stop isolating ourselves, but we need to speak as one industry because the industry is always being attacked and challenged. Private property rights are being slammed. That's what I'm into. And we can't do it individually with, you know, my association does this, I'm better than you. We have to come together as an industry. So one of my goals is to get everyone talking.
Well, you don't, in my opinion, you don't have any right to do anything else, right? You don't have the right to tell me that the other association isn't any good and I shouldn't belong. You don't have the right to tell me I should belong to this one and not that one.
Absolutely.
You have the challenge to get me to the best place for me, and I have to have the right to make that decision. But once that selection is made, we have to work in absolute concert to make sure, as you're describing, that all of us are singing from the same book.
Right.
And there's too much petty.
Right.
Too many things.
Thank you. That's what I'm
It's
learning.
too hard to interact. And I have and represent people in all of the associations.
Absolutely.
And the reason I'm here is because I believe that the challenge to make that happen falls on the largest association of the bunch.
Right.
And man,
That's us.
you are it.
Yeah, man.
Right?
And I got your help. I want to say
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that that's what you want to
No,
do.
100%. And
Yeah.
those associations know that that's what I'm about. But I want to invite you back, and we'll call it Let's Talk Mexico.
Okay.
Because he actually built a resort. He just told me these things that I was also ignorant on how to buy properties. I always think that the cartel is going to come in and take it, or your lease is up.
Well, and since you're going to Mexico tomorrow, let's just do a little teaser.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Okay.
Let's just make sure
I should bring you with me.
that you understand that Mexico has to deal with bad press all the time. All right? Because it's easier to put the focus on Mexico than it is to put the focus on us. I've been going to Mexico. My mother called me. The principal called my mother. She picked me up from junior high school. First year of junior high school, I got expelled. Now, that's hard to do, right? But my mother picked me up. She was a pilot, and she was a private pilot, and we went to Hollywood Burbank Airport, and she flew me to La Paz in 1963.
Year I was born.
Yeah, 1963.
60 years ago.
And so I have experience in Mexico.
Mexico, oh my gosh.
And it's important to note that I hear all the time, because I have investments in Mexico, people will say, well, I'd never go there. That's too dangerous. Please take Chicago,
Oh, God.
New York,
I already know what you're going to say.
St. Louis,
Right, Detroit.
Los Angeles,
Yeah.
San Francisco,
Yeah.
off of your list of places to go.
Right.
They are more
dangerous.
dangerous than Mexico City.
Yeah,
Right?
100%.
And it's just so wrong
Okay, good.
that we have people that are constantly
Well, let's break down that wall.
Let's
break it down.
It's wrong. And I need to tell you about the article they wrote about the wall. I went to Mexico City and did a interview for the main newspaper about the wall. Back when it was not, it was the older wall.
Okay, gotcha.
And how I feel about it. So we're gonna have a really exciting
good
time.
talk.
I promise.
Thank you so much, my
Thank
brother.
you.
Really
Thank
good
you,
to see
Steve.
you.
Thank
so
you.
nice to meet you.
And if you ever need the Powell Brothers, if you ever need San Diego Association Realtors, we're here for you. We're here for Peter. Love you guys at Coldwell Banker West. Shout out. A new time, a new era. You're going to take it, and you're going to prove to all these agents that no matter what anyone says about the market, there's a market in the market, and I think you're going to prove it again and bring it back up.
Well, and a shout out to the great people that are running the great teams.
Right.
There are some that I don't have any respect for, but the majority of the people in the business, I want to be one more reason for why they make a deal.
Yeah.
Because that cooperation is what matters,
Right.
and you can only get to the top through that kind of cooperation.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
We have to work together as an industry, as broker to broker, realtor to realtor. Just work together. Make the deal.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank
you.
All right. Again,
Once
shake your
again,
hand.
thank you, sir.
Thanks,
What a pleasure.
everyone. We're done.
It's a wrap.